30 seconds of video footage showing a distinguished black man in a tailored suit being violently dragged down the airplane aisle went viral within hours. What the world didn't see was the pilot's face when his phone rang moments later. Or the shocking truth behind America's newest racial controversy. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from. This story might make your blood boil, so hit that like button and subscribe, because you'll want to see what happens when a successful black CEO faces the ugly reality of flying while black, and how one phone call turned everything upside down in ways nobody expected. Darius Wilson straightened his custom-tailored Navy suit as he strode through San Francisco International Airport. At 38, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had fought for every inch of his success. As the founder and CEO of WillTech Solutions, a cybersecurity firm now valued at $780 million, Darius had become accustomed to moving through exclusive spaces. Yet even now, with all his achievements, he never forgot the lessons his father had drilled into him. Excellence isn't optional for us, son. It's required. Born in South Chicago to working-class parents, Darius grew up in a neighborhood where ambition was often stifled by circumstance. His father worked 2 jobs as a city maintenance worker, while his mother taught at an underfunded elementary school. From an early age, Darius showed exceptional aptitude for mathematics and computer science, staying after school to use the ancient computers in the school lab since they couldn't afford one at home. You remember when those security guards followed you around the electronics store when you were just trying to look at computers? His father had asked him once. That's why you need to be twice as good, not just to succeed, but to survive. Those words echoed in Darius's mind as he navigated his way through MIT on a full scholarship, while other students explored campus life. Darius spent nights coding and studying, developing the foundation for what would eventually become WillTech's revolutionary encryption algorithms. The few times he ventured to parties, he felt the weight of being one of only a handful of black students in his program. There was the night campus police stopped him walking back to his dorm, demanding identification while white students streamed past unquestioned. There was the professor who seemed surprised by his test scores, asking if he'd had extra help. There were the project groups that somehow never had room for him until assignments were paired by the instructor. Each incident hardened his resolve. Darius developed what he later called his philosophy of invisible excellence, letting his work speak so loudly that it drowned out prejudice. He graduated summa cum laude, turned down offers from tech giants, and started building WillTech from a tiny apartment with 2 other black MIT graduates who understood his vision. 12 years later, WillTech employed over 300 people and had offices in Chicago, Boston, and Atlanta. Their client list included Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and international organizations concerned about data security. Yet, despite his company's growth, Darius maintained a low public profile. He preferred working behind the scenes, letting his mostly white sales team handle client-facing interactions while he drove innovation. Today's meeting in San Francisco represented a potential turning point. Darius checked his watch, still 3 hours before his flight. The potential client, Global Secure, was considering a $250 million contract that would not only expand WillTech's reach, but potentially push the company's valuation over $1 billion, making it the first black-owned cybersecurity unicorn in Silicon Valley history. Darius had prepared meticulously. He knew the names of everyone who would be in the room, their backgrounds, their concerns, their priorities. He'd rehearsed his presentation until every word felt natural. His team had developed 3 customized security solutions specifically for Global Secure's infrastructure. His phone vibrated. It was Aisha Johnson, his chief operating officer. "Please tell me you're not calling with problems," Darius answered, trying to keep his tone light. "Just checking in," Aisha replied. "The team is nervous. This contract means everything for our 5-year plan." "I know," Darius said, finding a quieter corner of the terminal. "I've got this, Aisha. I've run through every possible question, every scenario. It's not just the contract," she continued. "It's what it represents. Breaking that billion-dollar ceiling." "One meeting at a time," he interrupted gently. "Let's secure the contract first." Then we can worry about making history." After reassuring her, Darius headed to his gate. He'd booked a first-class seat on Coastal Airlines Flight 2257, allowing him time to review his presentation one final time during the flight and arrive looking fresh for the meeting. The gate agent scanned his boarding pass with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Darius was used to these micro-expressions, the slight double-takes, the unconscious adjustments in tone, the surprise quickly masked when people realized who he was and what he had achieved. Boarding began, and Darius moved forward with the first-class group. He noticed a few glances from other passengers, the quick assessments he'd grown accustomed to over the years. He stored his briefcase in the overhead compartment and settled into seat 3A, a window seat that would give him privacy to work. As other first-class passengers boarded, Darius observed their comfortable familiarity with luxury travel. Most were white, middle-aged executives who barely acknowledged the flight attendants greeting them. A woman across the aisle gave him a curious glance before returning to her phone. Darius took out his tablet and began reviewing his notes, mentally preparing for the pivotal meeting that awaited him in San Francisco, unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to collide with America's oldest prejudices at 35,000 feet. The confrontation began with 4 words: "You're in my seat." Darius looked up from his tablet to see a man in his 50s, with thinning blonde hair and an expensive watch, staring down at him expectantly. The man wore the impatient expression of someone unaccustomed to obstacles. "I don't think so," Darius replied calmly, glancing at his boarding pass. "I'm in 3A." "That's impossible," the man said, his voice rising slightly. "I always book 3A. I'm Richard Holloway. I fly this route twice a month." Darius maintained his composure. "Perhaps there was a system error. Would you like to compare boarding passes?" Holloway made a show of checking his own ticket. "Mine clearly says 3A, first class window seat." A flight attendant with a nameplate reading Veronica Palmer approached, her professional smile firmly in place. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" "This man is in my seat," Holloway stated before Darius could respond. "May I see both of your boarding passes, please?" Veronica asked, extending her hand. Darius handed his over immediately. Holloway took a moment longer, giving Veronica a familiar smile. "I'm a Platinum Elite member, Veronica. I always sit in 3A." Veronica compared the documents, her expression shifting subtly as she verified the information. "Mr. Wilson is correctly seated in 3A, Mr. Holloway. Your assigned seat is 4C. Holloway's face reddened. "There must be some mistake. I specifically requested 3A. I apologize for any confusion, but the system shows Mr. Wilson was assigned 3A, Veronica explained. 4C is still a first-class aisle seat." "This is unacceptable," Holloway insisted, his voice growing louder. "I need a window seat. I get claustrophobic." Darius noticed other passengers turning to watch the exchange. He'd been in similar situations before. The presumption that he was somehow out of place, that his presence in premium spaces was an error to be corrected. "Perhaps Mr. Wilson would be willing to switch," Veronica suggested, turning to Darius with an expectant look that made it clear what response she anticipated. The familiar pressure descended, the unspoken expectation that he should accommodate, should make himself smaller to ease tension. It was the same pressure he'd felt in boardrooms when his ideas were dismissed until repeated by white colleagues, in high-end stores where salespeople followed him too closely, in restaurants where hosts tried to seat him near the kitchen despite reservations. "I specifically selected this seat to work during the flight," Darius explained calmly. "I have an important meeting in San Francisco, and I need the privacy of a window seat." Veronica's smile tightened. "Sir, Mr. Holloway is one of our frequent flyers, and I paid the same fare for this specific seat," Darius interrupted, his voice still measured but firm. Holloway scoffed. "Do you know who I am? I'm a senior vice president at First Capital Investment. I spend thousands with this airline every month." "Sir, please lower your voice," Veronica said to Holloway, though her tone lacked the authoritative edge it might have carried with a less valued customer. Darius felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the tension of being forced to navigate yet another racially charged interaction. while maintaining perfect composure. One wrong move, one flash of justified anger, and he knew how quickly he would transform from respected businessman to aggressive black man in the eyes of everyone watching. The commotion drew the attention of the captain, who emerged from the cockpit. Captain James Blackburn was tall with graying temples and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. "What seems to be the problem?" Captain Blackburn asked, his gaze moving between Holloway and Darius. "This gentleman refuses to acknowledge he's in the wrong seat," Holloway said immediately. "I have confirmed Mr. Wilson is correctly seated in 3A, Veronica interjected, showing the captain both boarding passes. Captain Blackburn frowned slightly. "Sir," he addressed Darius, "perhaps in the interest of getting our flight underway, you might consider moving to another first-class seat?" Darius felt a surge of frustration but kept his expression neutral. "Captain, I've verified that this is my assigned seat. I selected it specifically for this flight." "The issue is creating a disturbance," the captain continued, his tone hardening. "My primary concern is the safety and comfort of all passengers." Darius noted how quickly the situation had escalated from a simple seating verification to implied security concerns. It reminded him of an incident early in his career when security was called to his office because a receptionist didn't believe he was the CEO arriving to work on a Sunday. "There's no disturbance from my end," Darius pointed out. "I'm simply occupying the seat I purchased." Other passengers were openly staring now. Some had phones partially raised, sensing the potential for viral content. "Listen," Holloway interjected. "I'm not sitting in 4C. Either he moves, or I want to speak to someone who can sort this out properly." Captain Blackburn studied Darius for a moment. "Sir, I need to ensure this flight departs on schedule. If you're unwilling to cooperate with a simple seat change, I have concerns about potential non-compliance with crew instructions during the flight." The implications were clear. Darius thought of his meeting in San Francisco, of the contract hanging in the balance, of his team depending on him. He thought of the countless times he'd swallowed his pride to avoid exactly this type of confrontation. But something hardened within him. Perhaps it was the accumulated weight of 1,000 similar moments. Or perhaps it was simply that this indignity was too blatant to accept. "Captain," Darius said evenly, "I am seated in my assigned seat with a validated boarding pass. I have responded calmly and reasonably. There is no legitimate basis for suggesting I might not comply with safety instructions." A tense silence followed. Darius could see the decision forming in the captain's eyes before he spoke. "Sir, I'm giving you one final opportunity to move to another available first-class seat. Otherwise, I'll be forced to consider this a security issue requiring intervention." Darius thought of his father's words about dignity, about the fine line between accommodation and erasure. He thought of the younger black employees at Wiltec who looked to him as an example. "I decline to move from the seat I legally purchased," Darius stated, his voice calm but resolute. "If you wish to escalate this situation, that's your decision, but I want it noted that I have not been disruptive in any way." Captain Blackburn's jaw tightened. "Veronica, call airport security." As the flight attendant moved to the phone, Darius felt the familiar cold weight of injustice settling in his stomach. He'd spent his life building barriers against exactly this moment. Educational credentials, financial success, impeccable self-control, only to discover again that none of it provided true protection. 2 airport security officers boarded the plane 5 minutes later. Officer Bryant, a heavy-set white man with a crew cut, took the lead while Officer Reynolds, taller and younger, positioned himself in the aisle. Both wore expressions of predetermined judgment as they approached row 3. "Sir, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us," Bryant stated without preamble. Darius maintained his composure. "Officers, there seems to be a misunderstanding. I'm seated in my assigned seat, 3A, which I purchased. The captain has escalated a simple seating verification into a security matter without cause." Bryant's expression hardened. "Sir, the flight crew has final authority on this aircraft. They've determined you need to deplane." "On what grounds?" Darius asked, his tone reasonable but firm. "I've broken no rules or regulations." "We're not," Here to debate, Reynolds cut in. Either you exit the aircraft voluntarily, or we'll remove you. Darius felt multiple phones recording now. The other first-class passengers watched with expressions ranging from discomfort to curiosity to barely concealed satisfaction. Holloway stood nearby with arms crossed, a slight smirk visible at the corner of his mouth. I'd like to call my attorney before proceeding, Darius said, reaching slowly for his phone. Put the phone down, Bryant barked, his hand moving to his belt. That could be considered threatening behavior. The absurdity of the statement might have been laughable in another context, a business executive in a $1,000 suit being considered threatening for reaching for a phone. But Darius recognized the dangerous escalation pattern unfolding. I'm not being threatening in any way, Darius replied, keeping his hands visible. I'm simply requesting legal representation before I'm removed from a flight without cause. Final warning, Bryant stated. Stand up and come with us now. In that moment, Darius faced the impossible calculation that Black Americans had navigated for generations. Assert your rights and risk violence, or surrender your dignity for physical safety. His father's voice echoed in his mind. Choose your battles, son. Some hills aren't worth dying on. But another voice responded, some are. I respectfully decline to leave my rightfully purchased seat without proper cause or legal consultation, Darius stated clearly for the benefit of the recording phones. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. Bryant grabbed Darius's arm while Reynolds moved in from behind. Darius instinctively stiffened but didn't resist, aware that even the perception of resistance could justify escalating force. Stop resisting! Bryant shouted despite the fact that Darius was sitting still. I'm not resisting, Darius replied calmly. I'm simply not voluntarily. The officers yanked him from his seat with enough force to tear his suit jacket. Darius's head struck the overhead compartment, sending a burst of pain through his temple. He felt himself being dragged into the aisle, his legs hitting the armrests of adjacent seats. Please stop, he managed, his professional demeanor finally cracking. You're hurting me. Should have thought about that before you resisted, Reynolds muttered, twisting Darius's arm behind his back. As they dragged him down the aisle, Darius caught glimpses of passengers' faces, some horrified, some deliberately looking away, some openly recording the incident. His glasses fell and were crushed under someone's foot. A sharp pain shot through his shoulder as they maneuvered him through the narrow space. In that moment of physical helplessness, Darius experienced the cognitive dissonance familiar to successful Black Americans, the jarring contrast between his professional power and his current powerlessness. Hours earlier, he had been finalizing a $250 million deal. Now he was being manhandled like a criminal for sitting in a seat he had purchased. He thought about the meeting he would miss, about the disappointment his team would feel, about the validation this would give to competitors who doubted a Black-owned firm could handle major security contracts. He thought about how this incident would play in the media, how quickly his identity would be reduced to angry Black passenger, regardless of the facts. His father had told him stories about knowing your place in 1960s America. Darius had believed education and success had changed the equation. Now, with his face pressed against the carpet of the airplane aisle, he confronted the limits of that belief. Blood from his split lip stained the sleeve of his white shirt as they dragged him past shocked economy passengers. The physical pain was secondary to the humiliation, being publicly dehumanized despite everything he had achieved. The officers dragged him up the jetway and deposited him roughly in the terminal, where he collapsed against a wall, dazed and disoriented. His suit was torn, his lip bleeding, his shoulder radiating pain. A small crowd of travelers had gathered, some still filming. Stay here until we process your information, Bryant instructed before stepping away to consult with airport staff. Alone for a moment, Darius touched his bleeding lip with trembling fingers. The absurdity and injustice crashed over him in waves, all because he had refused to surrender a seat that was rightfully his. What would you do if you were dragged off a plane simply for sitting in your assigned seat? Comment number 1 if you believe Darius should fight this injustice publicly, or number 2 if you think he should handle it privately to protect his business interests. Like and subscribe to follow Darius's journey as this incident explodes across social media and changes lives forever. But the real question is, what happens when the tables suddenly turn and the power dynamic completely shifts? Let's find out. The first video hit Twitter 20 minutes after Darius was removed from the plane. Filmed from 3 rows back, it showed the security officers dragging him down the aisle while he calmly stated, "I am not resisting." The 12-second clip ended with a close-up of blood on his white shirt. Within an hour, 3 more videos emerged from different angles. One captured the initial confrontation with Holloway, clearly audible, demanding his seat. Another showed Captain Blackburn's conversation with Darius, including the captain's thinly veiled threat about non-compliance. The most damaging clip featured Officer Bryant shouting, "Stop resisting," while Darius sat perfectly still with his hands visible. By the time Darius was released from the airport medical facility with butterfly bandages on his forehead and lip and his shoulder in a sling, the hashtags "Flying While Black" and "Coastal Air Racism" were trending nationwide. Seated in an airport lounge with his undamaged phone, the only possession that had survived the incident intact, Darius watched his public image transform in real time. National news networks had picked up the story, initially framing it as "disruptive passenger removed from Coastal Airlines flight," with his name appearing only in smaller text underneath. Darius's first call was to his personal attorney, David Chen. "I've already seen the videos," Chen said before Darius could explain. "This is beyond my specialty. You need crisis management and civil rights representation immediately." "What? About the meeting? The global secure contract?" Darius asked, wincing as pain shot through his shoulder. "Darius, with respect, you need to focus on damage control right now. You're trending on every platform." A notification interrupted them. Coastal Airlines had issued a statement. This afternoon, security personnel removed a passenger from Flight 2257 after he refused to comply with crew instructions regarding seating arrangements. Coastal Airlines takes safety protocols seriously and supports our crew members' authority to maintain order on our aircraft. We are investigating the incident fully. The statement made no mention of the fact that Darius had been in his assigned seat, or the violence of his removal. Darius ended the call with Chen and immediately phoned Aisha at Wiltec headquarters. "Darius, thank God," she answered. "Are you okay? The videos are everywhere." "I've been better," he admitted, touching his split lip gingerly. "The global secure meeting, already called them," Aisha interrupted. "They've seen the news. They've agreed to reschedule, but Darius..." Her voice trailed off. "What aren't you telling me?" "Jenkins from their security team sent a private message. He's concerned about associating with controversy right now. Suggested we might want to send another executive team when we reschedule." The implication was clear. His presence might now be a liability rather than an asset. The bitter irony wasn't lost on Darius. He'd built his company on invisible excellence, deliberately keeping a low profile to avoid exactly this type of racialized attention. Now, through no fault of his own, he'd become the story. His phone buzzed continuously with notifications. Former classmates expressing outrage, business associates offering support, journalists requesting comments. Social media was divided, many expressing horror at his treatment, others questioning what he must have done to provoke such a response. One comment under a news article read, "If he'd just moved seats like asked, none of this would have happened. Why make such a big deal over nothing?" Another responded, "Would you give up a seat you paid for just because someone demanded it? This is about more than a seat." The cognitive dissonance was dizzying. In the corporate world, Darius wielded significant power. He made decisions affecting hundreds of employees and millions in revenue. Yet in that airplane, his education, wealth, and position had provided no protection against being physically dragged away for asserting his basic rights. His phone rang again, a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Wilson? This is Zoe Washington, civil rights attorney. I specialize in cases involving racial discrimination in public accommodations." "How did you get this number?" Darius asked. "Your chief technology officer, Devin Taylor. We went to law school together. He thought you might need specialized representation." Darius hesitated. Part of him wanted to handle this privately, to minimize further publicity, and protect the business he'd spent 12 years building. Another part recognized that privacy might equal erasure, allowing coastal airlines to bury the incident without addressing the underlying biases that had caused it. "What would representation look like?" he asked finally. "That depends on your goals," Zoe replied. "If you want maximum financial compensation, we go hard at both the airline and the airport authority with multiple claims. If you want systemic change, we approach it differently. What matters most to you right now?" It was a question Darius wasn't prepared to answer. His shoulder throbbed, his head pounded, and somewhere across the country his team was watching their carefully cultivated business relationships potentially unravel because their CEO had refused to surrender a seat that was rightfully his. "I need time to think," he told her. "Understandable," Zoe responded. "But you should know the airline's legal team won't be taking time. They'll be building their defense and shaping the narrative. Every hour matters." After ending the call, Darius closed his eyes and tried to center himself. The competing voices in his head grew louder. Fight back publicly and potentially risk the company he'd built. Handle it privately and perpetuate the system that allowed such incidents to occur. His phone vibrated with a text from his father. "Saw the news. Call me when you can. Remember who you are." Those simple words cut through the noise. Remember who you are. Not just a CEO, not just a victim of discrimination, but a man who had spent his life finding the balance between pragmatism and principle. Before he could reflect further, his phone rang again. This time it was a Coastal Airlines number. Captain James Blackburn settled into his seat in the cockpit after the commotion, running through his pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency. First Officer Rebecca Chen glanced at him with barely concealed disapproval. "That was necessary?" she asked quietly. "Passenger refused to comply with crew instructions," Blackburn replied tersely. "We can't have that kind of disruption." "He was in his assigned seat," Chen noted, keeping her voice low. "The situation was escalating. I made a judgment call." The truth was more complicated. Blackburn had seen a familiar pattern, a disruptive passenger creating a scene, refusing reasonable accommodation, potentially endangering the smooth operation of his flight. He hadn't verified the boarding passes himself. He'd trusted his instincts, honed over 27 years of flying. When those instincts involved a well-dressed white businessman like Holloway versus a black passenger, he hadn't questioned the assumptions guiding his decision. "We're running 20 minutes behind," he noted, changing the subject. "Let's get this bird in the air." Just as he was about to request pushback clearance, the cockpit phone rang. Blackburn frowned. Calls from operations at this stage usually meant further delays. Captain Blackburn speaking. "James, this is Victor Ramirez, VP of Operations." The executive's tense tone immediately put Blackburn on alert. "We need details on the passenger removal from your flight. Now." "Standard protocol for a non-compliant passenger," Blackburn responded. He refused to follow crew instructions regarding a seating issue. "Was the passenger in his assigned seat?" Ramirez asked bluntly. "There was a dispute." "Answer the question, James. Was he in his assigned seat or not?" Blackburn hesitated. "I didn't personally verify the boarding passes. The situation was escalating." "The passenger you had removed is Darius Wilson, CEO of Wiltech Solutions," Ramirez interrupted. "He was in his correctly assigned seat, which we've now confirmed through our system logs. He's also the head of a company that was finalizing a major corporate travel contract with us next month." The implications hit Blackburn like a physical blow. He'd made assumptions. He'd escalated rather than de-escalated. And now... "There are multiple videos," Ramirez continued, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Security dragging him down the aisle, blood on his shirt. Him calmly stating he's not resisting while being manhandled. All over a seat he paid for and was correctly assigned to." Blackburn's throat went dry. "I was ensuring the safety." "Stop talking," Ramirez cut in. "We're reviewing all security footage now. The gate agent confirms Wilson was assigned 3A. The other passenger, Holloway, has 3 previous incidents in our system for similar seating disputes." Each word landed like a hammer blow. Blackburn had never bothered to verify the actual seat assignments. He'd taken Holloway's side almost, automatically viewing Wilson as the problem despite his calm demeanor. The videos are going viral, James. CNN is running it. Our stock is already taking a hit. Legal is preparing for what might be a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. And you know what the worst part is? Every second of footage shows Wilson behaving with perfect composure while being treated like a criminal. Blackburn's mind raced, searching for justification. He refused to move when requested. He refused to give up a seat he had legally purchased and was correctly assigned, Ramirez corrected sharply. Would you have asked a white CEO to give up his assigned seat because another passenger wanted it? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and damning. Blackburn wanted to argue that race had nothing to do with his decision, that it was purely about maintaining order. But the evidence mounting against him suggested otherwise. I'm sending you all the footage, Ramirez continued. I want you to watch it before you say another word in the company's defense. Meanwhile, return the aircraft to the gate. The flight is delayed indefinitely while we address this situation. Return to gate? We're ready for pushback. This is a direct order, Captain. Return to gate immediately. After hanging up, Blackburn sat motionless, the reality of his actions settling over him. First Officer Chen watched him, waiting. Change of plans, he finally said, his voice hollow. We're returning to gate. As he made the announcement to increasingly frustrated passengers, Blackburn opened the email from Ramirez. The first attachment was security footage from multiple angles, synced to provide a complete timeline of the incident. There was Darius, Wilson, calmly showing his boarding pass. There was Holloway becoming increasingly agitated. There was Blackburn himself, addressing Wilson with visible suspicion while taking a notably different tone with Holloway. Most damning was the footage from the jetway camera after Wilson's removal. It showed the injured executive being left slumped against a wall, his expensive suit torn and bloodied, while travelers walked past staring at their phones, some already posting the videos that were now spreading across the internet. The second attachment was Wilson's passenger profile. Executive status traveler. Perfect record with the airline. No previous incidents of any kind. The third attachment was the current social media response, including comments specifically calling out Blackburn by name for racial bias. As the plane slowly returned to the gate, Blackburn confronted uncomfortable truths about the assumptions that had guided his decision-making. He'd automatically viewed Wilson as problematic, despite all evidence to the contrary. He'd escalated rather than investigated. He'd exercised his authority without verifying facts. And now, his 27-year career hung in the balance, along with the airline's reputation and potentially millions in lawsuit damages. All because he hadn't questioned the unconscious biases informing his judgment about which passenger deserved the benefit of the doubt. Darius sat in a private room in the airport's executive lounge, provided by suddenly solicitous Coastal Airlines staff. His torn suit jacket lay discarded on a chair. The butterfly bandages on his forehead and lip stood out starkly against his skin, and his arm rested uncomfortably in the sling. 3 hours had passed since his violent removal from the plane. In that time, the videos had been viewed millions of times. His phone continued to buzz with messages from friends, colleagues, journalists, and strangers. Some offering support, others seeking statements, a few containing racial slurs from anonymous accounts. The door opened, and 3 people entered. A woman in her 50s with a practiced smile and a Coastal Airlines executive badge reading, Patricia Morgan, Senior VP of Customer Experience. A nervous-looking younger man clutching a tablet identified as Jonathan Lee, Legal Department, and behind them, looking significantly less confident than he had on the airplane, Captain James Blackburn. Mr. Wilson, Patricia began with an expression of rehearsed concern. On behalf of Coastal Airlines, I want to express our deepest regret for the unfortunate incident earlier today. Darius noted her careful language. Regret. Unfortunate incident. Not apology. Not assault. Not discrimination. We take the comfort and safety of all our passengers very seriously, she continued. There appears to have been a series of miscommunications that resulted in an outcome no one wanted. Miscommunications, Darius repeated, his voice steady despite his injuries. Is that what you call having security officers drag a passenger down an airplane aisle for sitting in his assigned seat? Jonathan from legal shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Wilson, we're prepared to offer immediate compensation for any inconvenience and medical expenses incurred. Inconvenience? Darius interrupted, gesturing to his injuries. Is that how you categorize physical assault? His years of corporate negotiations served him well now. He recognized their transparent panic about potential lawsuits and PR disaster. He saw how they were attempting to minimize the incident, to frame it as an unfortunate misunderstanding rather than what it actually was: racial bias resulting in violence against a paying customer. Darius had spent his career carefully controlling his emotions in professional settings, knowing that displaying anger would instantly trigger stereotypes about aggressive black men. Now he channeled that discipline into cold precision. Before we continue this conversation, he said, I'd like clarity on one point. Captain Blackburn, did you verify whether I was correctly seated in 3A before escalating to security? The captain's face tightened. I relied on reports from my flight attendant. Yes or no, Captain? Did you personally verify the seating assignments? No, Blackburn admitted reluctantly. And when Mr. Holloway insisted the seat was his, despite evidence to the contrary, you sided with him. Why was that? The question hung in the air. Patricia attempted to intervene. I'm not sure this line of questioning is productive. I disagree, Darius replied calmly. It's essential to understanding why a passenger in his correctly assigned seat was physically removed from an aircraft, while the passenger making false claims was allowed to remain. He turned back to Blackburn. In your 20-plus years of flying, Captain, how many white executives have you had dragged off your aircraft for refusing to give up seats they paid for? Blackburn's jaw tightened. This wasn't about race. Then what was it about? Darius pressed. Because the facts are simple. I was in my assigned seat. I showed my boarding pass proving this. I remained calm throughout. Yet somehow I ended up bleeding and injured while being dragged off your aircraft like a criminal. Patricia attempted damage control. Mr. Wilson, we acknowledge that mistakes were made. We're prepared to offer significant compensation. I'm not interested in being paid to go away quietly, Darius interrupted. What happened today happens to black travelers constantly, just usually without the viral videos. The difference is that most don't have the resources to fight back. He fixed his gaze on Captain Blackburn. You made assumptions about which passenger was causing problems. You escalated rather than investigated. You used your authority to punish me for not giving up something I had every right to keep. And you never once considered that your judgment might be influenced by race. Blackburn started to respond defensively, then stopped, seemingly struck by something in Darius's words or expression. Jonathan from legal cleared his throat. Mr. Wilson, your company, Wiltech Solutions, was in discussions regarding a potential corporate travel contract with Coastal. Is that correct? So they'd done their research. Yes, a 7-figure annual contract that would have made Coastal the preferred carrier for all Wiltech business travel. Patricia's eyes widened slightly. The stakes had just increased significantly. Obviously, those discussions are now on hold, Darius continued. Along with our pending partnership with Global Secure, which was the purpose of my trip today. He watched their expressions shift as they calculated the expanding financial implications of the incident. What had begun as potential liability for one passenger's mistreatment was growing to include lost business contracts and partnerships. Mr. Wilson, Patricia said, her tone notably more deferential, what can we do to make this right? The power dynamic had completely reversed. Hours earlier, Darius had been physically powerless, dragged away despite his protests. Now, sitting, injured in borrowed clothes, he nevertheless held significant leverage over the very people who had authorized his mistreatment. Yet the victory felt hollow. He was being treated with respect now, not because of his humanity, but because of his position and the financial implications of his mistreatment. The millions of other black travelers without his resources would continue facing the same biased treatment tomorrow. What would you do if you were in Darius's position right now? Comment number 1 if you think he should seek maximum financial compensation for himself, or number 2 if you believe he should push for systemic changes that would help all travelers. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how Darius uses this completely reversed power dynamic to potentially transform an entire industry. But here's the real question. When you've been wronged so publicly and painfully, is it possible to find justice that goes beyond money? Let's find out. Alone again in the private airport lounge, Darius sat with his phone in his hand, scrolling through his options. The pain medication provided by the airport medical facility had dulled the physical discomfort, but his mind remained razor-sharp, analyzing pathways forward with the same precision he applied to business decisions. Attorney Zoe Washington had sent a detailed email outlining potential legal strategies. Based on available evidence, we have grounds for multiple claims including assault, battery, false imprisonment, discrimination in public accommodations, and negligence, she wrote. Conservative estimates put potential damages in the 7-figure range, possibly higher given your status and the public nature of the incident. His PR team had sent their own recommendations, suggesting ways to leverage the incident for corporate visibility. While obviously traumatic, their memo stated, this situation presents an opportunity to position Wiltec as a company that stands against discrimination while highlighting your personal resilience in the face of injustice. Meanwhile, his leadership team at Wiltec continued sending updates about potential business fallout. The global secure contract remained uncertain. Some partners expressed concerns about association with controversy, while others sent messages of support and solidarity. The paths before him diverged sharply. He could pursue maximum financial compensation, potentially walking away with millions in a confidential settlement. He could use the incident to raise his public profile and potentially grow Wiltec's brand recognition. Or he could push for structural changes at Coastal Airlines, a longer and more uncertain path with less personal benefit. His phone rang, his father calling for the 3rd time. Darius finally answered. "Son," William Wilson's voice was steady and concerned. "How badly are you hurt?" "Some cuts and bruises, shoulder sprain." "I'll heal," Darius replied. "I've been watching the news. Brings back memories." His father had participated in lunch counter sit-ins during the civil rights movement, something he rarely discussed but which had shaped his worldview profoundly. "What are you thinking about doing?" Darius sighed, still weighing options. The airline's running scared. Their legal team's already talking settlement numbers. "And that's what you want? Money?" "I don't know, Dad," Darius admitted. "Part of me wants to hit them where it hurts. Another part remembers what I always told you," his father finished. "About fighting battles that create change, not just noise." The conversation transported Darius back to his childhood kitchen, where his father would discuss his experiences during the movement over simple dinners. "Some folks thought success meant getting your own seat at the segregated table," he'd explained once. "Real victory was changing who could sit at any table anywhere." "The lawyers say I could get millions," Darius said. "And what changes after you cash that check?" his father asked. "Does the next black traveler get treated any different?" The question hung in the air between them. Darius thought about his mother, who had passed away 5 years earlier. She had been the pragmatist in the family, balancing his father's idealism with practical wisdom. "Your mother would tell you there's no shame in compensation for genuine harm," his father continued, as if reading his thoughts. "But she'd also remind you that dignity can't be measured in dollars." After ending the call with his father, Darius leaned back, closing his eyes. The competing priorities crystallized in his mind. Compensation versus transformation. Personal. Redress versus systemic change. The immediate versus the enduring. Coastal Airlines had demonstrated that they responded to financial pressure. Their sudden concern about his treatment emerged only after learning about his corporate status and potential contracts. That suggested a path forward that might satisfy both his pragmatic and principled instincts. He called Zoe Washington. "I've made a decision about how I want to proceed. I'm listening, she replied. I want to propose an alternative to standard litigation, something that addresses both my personal situation and the systemic issues. What are you thinking? A comprehensive settlement package that includes financial compensation, but primarily focuses on structural changes to prevent similar incidents. I want to use Wiltech's expertise to help design and implement bias reduction protocols and training. There was a pause on the line. That's unusual. Most clients in your position want to maximize their personal compensation. I'm not most clients, Darius replied, and I don't want to just extract money from them. I want to transform how they operate. They might not go for it, Zoe warned. Corporations typically prefer one-time payments over long-term commitments to change. Then we make it financially attractive for them to choose change, Darius said, his business strategist. Mind fully engaged now. We structure the agreement so that implementing the reforms costs less than what they'd pay in pure financial damages. That could work, Zoe admitted. What specific changes did you have in mind? Darius outlined his vision. Mandatory bias, training, new protocols for passenger disputes, diversity initiatives for flight crews and executives, and technology solutions to reduce subjective enforcement of airline policies. It's ambitious, Zoe said when he finished, but it might be exactly what they need right now to salvage their reputation. Set up a meeting with their CEO and board, Darius instructed. Not middle management or legal representatives. I want to talk to the people who can make real decisions. After ending the call, Darius felt a clarity of purpose he hadn't experienced since before the incident. The path forward wasn't about maximizing personal gain or even about seeking retribution. It was about leveraging this painful experience to create meaningful change, using the tools and position he'd built over years to address problems that affected people who didn't have his resources or platform. His phone buzzed with a notification. Coastal Airlines CEO Thomas Reynolds had agreed to meet in 2 hours. The Coastal Airlines corporate headquarters occupied the top floors of a glass tower in downtown Atlanta. Darius, still wearing his sling, but now dressed in a fresh suit delivered by his assistant, was escorted to the executive conference room by a nervous corporate communications director. Around the polished mahogany table sat CEO Thomas Reynolds, a silver-haired veteran of the airline industry, General Counsel Victoria Chin, Chief Operating Officer Michael Phillips, and 3 board members whose stern expressions suggested they recognized the gravity of the situation. Captain James Blackburn sat apart from the others, his presence unexpected but significant. Darius's attorney Zoe Washington took a seat beside him, setting a leather portfolio on the table. Mr. Wilson, Reynolds began, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. On behalf of Coastal Airlines, I want to personally apologize for your experience today. It falls far short of our service standards, and we take full responsibility for the failures that occurred. Darius noted the shift in language from unfortunate incident to failures, and from regret to apology. Progress, but still carefully phrased to minimize legal exposure. Before we discuss resolution, Darius replied, I want to establish a shared understanding of what actually happened and why it matters beyond my individual case. He opened his tablet and projected a presentation onto the room's main screen. The first slide showed statistics on discrimination complaints filed against major airlines over the past 5 years. Coastal's numbers were highlighted in red, significantly higher than industry average. This isn't an isolated incident, Darius continued, advancing to customer survey data broken down by demographic groups. Black travelers consistently report negative experiences on coastal flights at rates 3 times higher than white travelers. The difference is that most incidents don't result in viral videos. The executives shifted uncomfortably as Darius methodically worked through the data, much of it publicly available but never before compiled so comprehensively. He wasn't just telling his story. He was placing it within a pattern of systemic issues that the airline had failed to address. Now to my specific proposal, Darius said, reaching the core of his presentation. I'm prepared to settle all potential claims without protracted litigation, but not in exchange for just monetary compensation. He outlined his vision. A comprehensive bias training program developed and implemented by Wiltech, new protocols for resolving passenger disputes with third-party oversight, hiring initiatives to increase diversity among flight crews and executives, and technology solutions to eliminate subjective enforcement of airline policies. The total implementation cost over 3 years would be approximately $12 million, Darius concluded, significantly less than what you would likely pay in damages, legal fees, and lost business if this case proceeds to court. Reynolds leaned forward. While we appreciate your creative approach, Mr. Wilson, traditional settlements typically involve financial compensation without ongoing obligations. This isn't a traditional situation, Darius countered, and I'm not interested in a traditional outcome. Victoria Chen, the general counsel, interjected. The programs you're proposing would require significant operational changes across our entire system. That goes far beyond addressing your specific experience. Exactly, Darius agreed. Because my experience reflects systemic problems that affect thousands of travelers. Paying me off doesn't solve those problems. It just makes this particular PR crisis go away until the next incident. He turned to Captain Blackburn, who had remained silent throughout the presentation. Captain, would the training I'm proposing have changed how you approach the situation on that plane? Blackburn met his gaze directly. Possibly. I made assumptions I shouldn't have made. I escalated without verification. I didn't question my own judgment. The captain's unexpected candor shifted the energy in the room. This wasn't just about legal liability anymore. It was about acknowledging real failures and considering real solutions. Michael Phillips, the COO, raised practical concerns. These programs would take months to develop and years to fully implement. The public wants to see immediate action, which is why the proposal includes both short-term responses and long-term structural changes. Zoe interjected, distributing detailed timelines to everyone present. Phase 1 begins immediately with public commitments and policy revisions. Implementation occurs over 36 months with quarterly progress reports and independent verification. The negotiations continued for hours, moving from broad concepts to specific deliverables. Reynolds pushed back on certain elements while embracing others. Board members questioned costs and implementation challenges. Throughout, Darius maintained both his vision and flexibility on details. One final point, Darius said as the discussion approached conclusion. Any agreement must include a provision that Captain Blackburn is not terminated as a result of this incident. The request surprised everyone, Blackburn most of all. May I ask why? Reynolds inquired carefully. Firing the captain would be an easy way to show you're taking action, but it wouldn't address the underlying issues, Darius explained. The problem isn't one individual's decisions, it's a culture that enabled those decisions. I want Captain Blackburn to become part of the solution by participating in developing and implementing the training program. Blackburn stared at Darius, bewilderment evident in his expression. After what happened, you're advocating for me to keep my job. With conditions, Darius clarified. Your participation in the program isn't optional. Your perspectives, including your recognition of what went wrong, will be valuable in creating meaningful change. As the meeting concluded, Reynolds extended his hand to Darius. We have the framework of an agreement. Our teams will need to finalize details, but I believe we can move forward with your approach. Outside the conference room, Blackburn approached Darius privately. I don't understand. You could have demanded my termination. Most people would have. Firing you would be easy for them and satisfying for me, Darius acknowledged. But it wouldn't change anything. The next captain would face the same systemic pressures, the same unexamined biases. This isn't about punishing you. It's about transforming the environment that shaped your decisions. As Darius left the building with Zoe, he felt neither triumph nor closure, only the weight of the work ahead and the knowledge that this painful experience might serve a purpose beyond his individual case. The transformation would be neither quick nor complete, but it was a beginning. You know, Zoe said as they waited for their car, most clients would have taken the money and walked away. I'm not most clients, Darius replied, echoing his earlier words, and some battles are worth fighting differently. 6 months later, Darius Wilson stood in the first-class boarding line at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, preparing to board Coastal Airlines Flight 1857 to San Francisco. The same route, the same airline. A deliberate choice. The changes were immediately visible. The gate agents now wore body cameras, a Wiltec-designed solution implemented across all coastal flights. The boarding passes displayed seat assignments in larger, clearer font with confirmation codes that matched overhead displays. Most significantly, a new dispute resolution protocol was prominently posted, outlining passengers' rights and the verification steps required before any passenger could be removed. "Mr. Wilson, welcome aboard," the gate agent greeted him, scanning his boarding pass. "Seat 3A is ready for you." As Darius moved down the jetway, he reflected on the whirlwind. Months since the incident, the settlement agreement had been finalized 2 weeks after the initial meeting. Comprehensive, detailed, and publicly disclosed rather than sealed as most such agreements were. Coastal Airlines had committed to the full transformation program, while also providing substantial compensation for his injuries and missed business opportunities. The Global Secure contract had come through despite the delayed meeting. Wiltec's valuation had indeed crossed the billion-dollar threshold, making history as the first black-owned cybersecurity unicorn. Unexpectedly, the publicity surrounding the incident had brought new attention to the company's innovative approaches, leading to partnerships that might otherwise have taken years to develop. Boarding the aircraft, Darius noticed another visible change: the increased diversity among the flight crew. The flight attendant who greeted him was a young black woman whose nameplate read, Taylor. The bias training program had been implemented for all customer-facing staff, with early feedback showing measurable improvements in passenger experience across demographic groups. As Darius stored his briefcase and settled into his seat, a familiar figure appeared in the aisle: Captain James Blackburn. "Mr. Wilson," Blackburn said, extending his hand, "I wanted to greet you personally. I'm your captain again today." Darius shook his hand, noting the absence of defensiveness that had characterized their early interactions. "How's the training program going from your perspective, Captain?" "Challenging," Blackburn admitted. "Confronting unexamined assumptions isn't comfortable, but necessary." He paused. "I've been working with the development team on the simulation modules, using my mistakes as teaching scenarios." It hadn't been an easy path for either man. Blackburn had faced internal criticism and external scrutiny as he became the reluctant face of the airline's transformation efforts. Darius had weathered skepticism from those who felt he should have pushed for harsher consequences or larger financial settlements. "The quarterly numbers look promising," Darius noted. "Passenger complaints down 22% overall, 47% reduction in bias-related incidents. Still a long way to go," Blackburn acknowledged, "but it's movement in the right direction." Their conversation was interrupted as other passengers boarded. Darius watched Blackburn return to the cockpit, reflecting on their unexpected connection. Not friendship, that would be asking too much given their history, but a working relationship built on a shared commitment to preventing similar incidents in the future. The San Francisco trip this time was for a national business conference, where Darius had been invited to deliver a keynote address on transforming trauma into systemic change. The story of his removal from the plane and the subsequent transformation program had become a case study in how to leverage individual incidents to address broader patterns of discrimination. Other airlines had begun implementing similar programs, partly due to public pressure and partly due to the early data showing improvements in customer satisfaction and reduced complaints at Coastal. What had begun as one painful incident was sparking industry-wide reconsideration of how airlines handled passenger disputes and trained their staff. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Darius opened his laptop to review his keynote speech. He had deliberately structured it to focus not on his victimization, but on the collaborative process of creating meaningful change, acknowledging that transformation required ongoing effort from both those who experience discrimination and those with the power to change systems. 6 weeks earlier, Darius had launched a new division within Wiltec, focused specifically on technology solutions for bias reduction. The tools developed for Coastal Airlines had applications across industries, From healthcare to financial services to law enforcement, anywhere human judgment could be affected by unconscious bias. The division was staffed primarily by young, black tech professionals, many recruited from historically black colleges and universities that WillTech had established partnerships with. Darius took particular satisfaction in mentoring these emerging talents, sharing not just technical knowledge but strategies for navigating environments where they might be underestimated or misjudged. "Success isn't just about what you achieve," he told them during orientation. "It's about what doors you open for others to follow." The flight landed in San Francisco on schedule. As passengers prepared to deplane, Captain Blackburn's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Coastal Airlines, I want to thank you for flying with us today. We're committed to ensuring every passenger has a safe, respectful experience on our aircraft. Your feedback helps us continue improving." The new standard announcement, implemented as part of the transformation program, emphasized the airline's commitment to respectful treatment of all passengers. As Darius gathered his belongings, he reflected on the journey, not just from Atlanta to San Francisco, but from that moment of powerlessness in the airplane aisle to the creation of systemic changes that would benefit countless travelers he would never meet. The path forward remained challenging. One incident, no matter how public, couldn't erase centuries of bias. One company's transformation couldn't solve industry-wide problems, but it was a start. A demonstration that even painful experiences could be channeled into positive change when approached with both principle and pragmatism. In his briefcase was a flash drive containing video interviews with Coastal Airlines, employees discussing their experiences with the new training program. The final segment featured Captain Blackburn candidly discussing his own growth process, from defensiveness to recognition to active participation in creating change. These stories of transformation, rather than just the viral video of injury, would form the core of Darius's keynote address. Because ultimately, the most powerful response to discrimination wasn't just exposing it, but creating pathways to overcome it, not just for those with resources and platforms, but for everyone. This story reminds us that true justice extends beyond individual compensation to addressing root causes. When faced with discrimination, Darius could have accepted a hefty settlement and walked away. Instead, he leveraged his position to create lasting change that would benefit countless others facing similar treatment. His approach teaches us that transformative justice requires both accountability and structural reform. The incident reveals how unconscious bias operates even in routine interactions, affecting how people are perceived and treated regardless of their achievements or status. Captain Blackburn didn't recognize his assumptions until confronted with their consequences, demonstrating how bias often remains invisible to those who hold it. Most importantly, the story shows that meaningful change requires participation, from both those who experience discrimination and those with power to change systems. By insisting that Blackburn remain part of the solution rather than simply being punished, Darius created space for genuine transformation rather than superficial fixes that leave underlying problems intact. What situations in your life could benefit from this approach of transformation over retribution? Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you could do more than just offer sympathy? Comment below sharing a time when you saw someone turn a negative experience into positive change. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe to hear more powerful stories of people overcoming injustice and creating meaningful change in our world. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that even painful experiences can become catalysts for transformation. Thank you for joining me on this journey through difficult but important territory. Remember, your voice and actions matter. Sometimes, the most powerful response to injustice is not just calling it out, but working collaboratively to ensure it doesn't happen to anyone else.